Okay, Antoinette.
I have two questions, but I'll make them very, very quick. Firstly, you said a couple of times that Israel is stuck in Gaza. They can't get out. Can you be more specific about why they are stuck and why they can't withdraw? And my second question, in all the decades that you have been following this conflict, this situation closely, where do you think Israel is currently? You said that reputationally, politically, they're losing, but specifically in regards to the information war and their ability to put out disinformation. We've got beheaded babies and people being baked and widespread sexual violence. Do you think that this is different in terms of people's willingness, the broader public or the Greater West's willingness to believe everything that Israel says?
These are two great questions, as are all the other questions, for sure. But just on the first question is, why are the Israelis, or why am I saying the Israelis are stuck in Gaza? Well, they have said they're not leaving Gaza, right? They're going to stay there, and they understand it is a choice, but they decided to stay. I mean, I said they're stuck in Gaza, and I said that's because they decided to stay there. I mean, it may be a choice. You might not like the choice, but that's the choice they made. And you want to remember, they've not defeated Hamas, number one. And number two, there's the question of who's going to run the place, right? So they're going to stay. How they, do this remains to be seen. How many troops they leave, where those troops are deployed, how those troops act, that remains to be seen, but they're stuck. Second question is a very interesting question. It is all about controlling the narrative. The Israelis controlled the narrative in really powerful ways up until the late 1980s. Then you had this group of historians in Israel called the New Historians, who were then young at the time, and they got access to the archives. And they got access to the records on how Israel was created. And what they did is they exploded all the myths, or almost all the myths, about how Israel was created. And it really portrayed the Israelis in a negative light, okay? And that was the start of trouble. And I could tell you all sorts of stories about that. Because people began to think differently about Israel than from the way we thought about when I was young. There was a book by Leon Uris. It was called Exodus, and everybody read it, and it was a movie. Paul Newman and Eva Marie Saint starred in it, and it portrayed the Israelis in a very positive light and the Arabs in a very negative light. And once the new historians came along, all sorts of people, mainly at the elite level, began to think differently about the creation of Israel and Israel's behavior. Then what happens is you get social media and you get the internet. And Israel has huge influence in influencing what the Wall Street Journal, what the New York Times, what the Washington Post says. But TikTok is a nightmare for Israel. It's an utter nightmare. There's this famous conversation that you can get on the internet of Jonathan Greenblatt, who is the head of the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL. He's Abe Foxman's successor. He's on the phone talking to somebody, and it's, there's a video of it, and he's talking about TikTok. And it's just a disaster for Israel. People see what's happening. And the Israelis, this is really quite remarkable. The Israelis are filming themselves doing absolutely horrible things to the Palestinians and then putting it on the internet. It's just hard to believe. And furthermore, just on the whole genocide story, if you want to make the case that Israel is guilty of genocide, you have to do two things. You have to provide evidence of intent, number one, and you have to provide evidence that Israel's actions are consistent with the intent. Now, with regard to intent, the Israeli leaders across the board, including Benjamin Netanyahu, after October 7th, said all sorts of things that, in my opinion, demonstrated genocidal intent.
This was documented in the South African case.
Yes, documented in the South African case. And by the way, there was a piece in Haaretz, which is like the New York Times of Israel. And the headline of the piece in Haaretz said, "The road to The Hague." This is the International Court of Justice decision on whether there's potentially genocide. The Haaretz piece said, this is the headline, "The road to The Hague is paved with public comments by Israeli leaders," which is exactly right. You just sort of say to yourself, are they really saying these things? Right? And then again, you have all these videos. And I was talking to my daughter one day who's not very political at all. She's in her 40s, and she was talking about watching what the Israelis are doing to children on TikTok. And she said, "I can't watch TikTok. I just can't watch these videos anymore. They're so horrible," right? This is a disaster for Israel. It's a public relations disaster.
John, but one school teacher, I think, wants to ask a question.
Thanks for the talk. You mentioned the winners and losers, referring to the US, Iran, and Israel of this war. But I'm wondering, I'd like to hear what you feel will be the impact on the 7.4 million Palestinians, the other party to the war, in the long run. Obviously, they're suffering at the moment. But my real question is really about the one-state solution. You said the options are a one-state solution, two-state solution, continued apartheid, or ethnic cleansing. And for those of us that believe that ethnic cleansing and apartheid are not acceptable and that want to see the maintenance of international law, that leaves us with the one-state or two-state. And I think many experts are saying the two-state's not possible, given the patchwork of illegal settlements. So what would have to change in the future to bring about a one-state solution?
As I said, I don't have a good answer to that. As I said to these two gentlemen on my left, I hope that I'm wrong and they're right about the possibility of a two-state solution. I think they're wrong, and as I made clear, and I don't think there's any way you're going to get a one-state solution. And I kind of don't fully understand where this train is headed, right? I think Israel is in deep trouble. I think the Israelis will continue to push at ethnic cleansing. I think that's what you're going to see. I think for the reasons I tried to elaborate here, that from their point of view seems to be the best solution. I don't think they can get away with it. I'm not 100% sure. I hope they can't get away with it. But where this all ends, it gets back to the brief discussion I was having with Tom when Tom said, Israel has a nuclear weapon. It's not going anywhere. And you want to remember that South Africa had a nuclear weapon, as I reminded Tom, and apartheid South Africa disappeared. The sort of long-term future of Israel is in question for a lot of reasons, many of which I have not touched on tonight for time-related reasons. But you want to understand that immediately after October 7th, 500,000 Israelis left the country.
500,000 Israelis left Israel after October 7th?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was talking to somebody who is in the Polish foreign policy establishment the other day, and he was telling me you'd be amazed at how many Israelis are applying for a Polish citizenship, so that they can have a Polish passport. And the same is true with other European countries. I don't want to get into the centrifugal forces that are at play inside of Israel because it's too late in the evening. But this is a country that just has lots of problems. And where this all goes, I don't know.
Not least the demographic challenges. Now,